This podcast ep was made by Abes.
I don't consider talent the only talent. I consider people that sell talent. Like it's a talent. Yeah, it's a very hard job.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals.
This is Media Sales Mastery. I'm your host, Jamie Wood, and our topic today is working with content and editorial. Now, content and editorial are a core function within most media companies, and the ability to leverage content integration or editorial support for a client solution is extremely powerful. However, collaborating with content and editorial as a media sales professional requires a very specific approach. It requires diplomacy, empathy, finesse, and a clear articulation of how you're going to balance the needs of the audience and the needs of the advertiser. To unpack this, we're joined by Jay Walkerden of Podshape. Let's dive in now.
The first five.
Welcome, Jay.
G'day, Jamie. It's been ages.
It has been a while. It's funny we're doing it remote too, since we're both proud Brisbaneites, and you've got a beautiful studio there, but thanks for making the time to meet, man.
Well, I know what happens if you came to the studio. We'd end up over the road at the Newmarket Hotel, so it's probably better we do it this way.
It absolutely is. Well, the first thing though, for those of people who aren't mates with you, give us a high-level summary of your career in content and in particular what you're currently doing over there at Podshape.
Yeah, it scares me when I say this, but been in content and media for almost 40 years. Started in radio in Western Australia as an announcer, moved sort of across the country back in the day with Austereo. So worked in Melbourne, Sydney, back to Perth and become a program director. Mm-hmm. And then really went from being on the mic side to being on the talent management side and running a radio station. And then worked across Australia, moved to the UK for 5 years, worked at Global Media with a bunch of people, and then came back to Australia, worked at MCM Media for a year with Cyber Choice, which was an awesome experience, and then over to Nova for almost 10 years. Firstly as the content director up here in Brizzy, then as the general manager, then as a three-way split between general manager, content director, and head of podcasting. Left Nova in 2020 and started this business, Podshape, which for all intents and purposes is a storytelling business. We shape the world through stories is sort of our tag, if you like. But yeah, do everything from working with brands through to producing podcasts with creators and then doing our own shows as well. We've done about 40 million downloads in the space of 5 years.
Well, 40 million and 5 once we add this podcast into the mix, mate.
Boom.
So you're actually a perfect guest for this topic because in a previous role, you obviously sat across the commercial and the revenue side of the business as well as content. And obviously you're the head shaper there at Podshape and you sit across the whole thing as well. What I want to do though is kind of get into this idea of working with content and editorial as a media sales professional. So to set this one up, I'd just love to kind of get a kind of overview of the world of content. Like, really broad question, but like, what is the underlying philosophy of someone who is tasked with serving an audience in a media business?
You just nailed it then. It's the audience. It starts, in my mind, it starts and ends there. It's who are you playing to and what do they care about? And really everything else is just lovely to have. But those two pieces, if you start with the audience first, generally means you're on the right track to finding the right audience. And then hopefully, if you can build that audience to a size, then you make some money out of it too.
I love that. Well, it's the perfect setup for the main topic.
Media Sales Mastery.
Because the first thing I want to understand is, in all of my experience in Australia, overseas, everywhere, in a content business that has advertising funding, why does the relationship between sales and content feel like it's so fractured a lot of the time? What's going on there?
I think, well, it's an interesting question. I pondered it since we started talking about doing this episode. I think there's two parts to this answer. The first is when I was just a content guy and had no care or feeling about revenue, to be honest. My world was just, how am I building an audience? And I was paid to build an audience. And sometimes I was paid more if I built a bigger audience and a number one audience. So, but then when I got into the management side, I started to realize that there are two things can be true at the same time. it's okay. We're a commercial business. It's okay to build an audience and make money from that audience. So, and I think that just changes the approach. Because it's easy as a content person to sit back and go, oh, sales want us to do this. They have no idea. But equally, as a content person, you have no idea the pressure a salesperson's under to walk into a meeting and go, hey, sorry, we didn't deliver on that. The team didn't want to do that today. And so I think it really is looking at it from I think it's fractured because I think people have their own view in mind when they go into a relationship. And what I tried to do in the time working with teams across both was to let them try and understand why we were doing it, and then equally how that could benefit them, our show, the audience, and obviously at the end, the other end, revenue.
Yep. Is it really, in your experience, is it really that simple sometimes that it is just misaligned incentives? Because I feel very strongly that you've got the sales team that are hell-bent on being competitive in the market. We know in particular radio, I think, was one that there would always be a lot of push for integration into content and a lot of kind of requests for talent to do certain things. But it always felt like at the end of the day, the sales team had the revenue number to get, and that's what they were measured on and they were rewarded for. Content kind of had the same thing in their world. Does it kind of come down to that somebody needs to sit there and actually bridge the two together more?
So I remember being in ratings days on a Tuesday morning, delivering ratings to a team as a general manager, as a leader, and my a breakfast team might have been stoked that they were number one, but a sales team were bitterly disappointed that we were number 2, 25-54. Now both of those things are true, and both of those things matter. So it's trying to align sort of both of those differing opinions or differing metrics to say it's okay for us to be a number one breakfast show, but it's not okay for us to be a number 2, 25-54, because that's an equally important measure, because no one's getting paid if that doesn't happen. So I think I may not be answering the question as succinctly as I want, but what I think it's important is to try and align both values almost from the outset. We're doing this because we are trying to be a number one. And so for a period in my time in management, working with teams and money, I aligned the show target from a financial incentive for the teams to what the station target was.
Right.
So that's an easy win.
Yeah.
We're all going for the same thing.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned it before, and it was an Oz stereoism from back in the day, which is funny because I never worked there, but I've heard it paraphrased, was this principle of never lose a client, never lose a listener, which was kind of, to me, was just such a beautiful kind of way of articulating the reality of a business like this, which is that there are multiple people we need to serve. And actually, we all collectively, whilst there's that tension that plays out and we all have our own objectives, we also need to remember that we've got to align on the bigger picture here, which is actually the overall health of the business.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And there are many shows that are brilliant on the air, but are number 4, and they don't last. They just don't. There are conversations happening. I'm sure there are conversations happening now in Australian radio where there are shows that aren't performing, and equally there are shows that don't perform but do good revenue. So how do you find the balance is probably the question. And I guess it gets back to, what I said at the start, it starts with the audience.
And with Podshape, I think what's interesting is obviously there's the audio component to what you do, but it seems like you're increasingly in the visual content game. You're creating long form video content as well. And I wanted to kind of get your perspective on maybe where in your mind sellers maybe do need to stay a bit more in their lane. So more specifically, what are some of the scenarios that might arise where a sales team can kind of inadvertently damage the audience experience, or indeed just do something to really destabilize their own relationship with the content arm of the business?
I think it's answering questions sometimes, and I've been in these meetings, and I still am in them now, where a client or on the commercial side might be interested in a piece of something, and you have to think about the talent you're working with and go, that's not going to suit them. Like, yes, I know it might be commercially an imperative for you, but if you want this to be a piece that really connects with the audience, that ain't going to work. So how do we find a win-win situation? How do we find both of us winning out of this? And it might be for the client to relax a few things, and it might be for the talent to relax a few things. But I don't think it's as simple as they should just do it because they're getting paid for it. Because it doesn't work. It hurts the audience. It hurts the client-talent relationship. The talent doesn't want to then do more work with that client. The client then doesn't want to do more work with that talent. Like, it's flawed in every single possible sense. So
what, just thinking about that on the fly, like, let's say I came to you and I said, we're working with, a fast food brand, and they absolutely love this talent. And what they want to do is they want to sponsor a podcast, but they want them to taste this burger and review it on air. And it's, like something like that that's super prescriptive, it's super invasive, and it's a high stakes in terms of there's a lot of money attached to us basically just saying yes and doing this. How would you, on the side of that request, sort of work through that and sort of start to unpack a way forward?
I'd ask them to step back a couple of steps and just say, really interesting idea. Firstly, can we check that the talent is interested in your product, your burger? Because you may find the talent goes, never eaten one, don't care about it. I'm actually a health nut. It's not my thing. So that there's the start. And then the second is the obvious question. Sorry, can we step back from your idea for a moment and tell me what you want out of this? What are you looking for? Oh, what am I looking for? Well, we want people to trial the new burger. Excellent. Can we come at that from a few different angles then? What would increase trial of a burger? How have you seen it work before? Oh, okay. Well, we found that by people tasting it, they want to buy more. Okay, cool. So how do we make that work? And so it really is just stepping back to the baseline of what are you hoping to do here? I know that sounds super simplistic, but mostly these things they're simple. Like, find the thing that the client needs. We want them to trial our burger. Then talk to the talent and go, okay, our key here is they want to trial a burger. What's some ideas that we could do? And in one of those ideas might be the client's idea that you can help mold into something that works for the talent, and they are going to authentically deliver it as opposed to just ring it in. This is off topic a little bit, but that's why I hate live reads in radio, because I feel like they are, yes, you grab Jamie, but I hate live reads in radio because I just don't think they're authentic. And if I look at an authentic live read or an authentic sell in podcasting, they are so different. They're not prescriptive. Well, they shouldn't be prescriptive.
Can you go into that a bit more? Like, I guess, talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I won't name clients, but I will say in the old days of radio, the guys would get a 30-second script, which would sit in their folder. They'd get in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on which show, and they'd voice their script. I say this line, you say that line. I say this line, you say that line. Great. Filed, put in the log, delivered at 8:23 at a premium. Or here's the essence of what we're trying to get across. There's a couple of must-haves. The must-haves might be the website, the offer, and the lettuce and cheese and the special sauce on the bun. But everything else is playable. And so then you go, cool, let's talk about the new thing. And you're employing people and paying them very big money to deliver content. You trust them to turn a microphone on between 6 and 9 or 4 and 6 in the afternoon and talk to a large audience. Why the hell wouldn't you put some trust in them to allow them to create some really special content inside of a commercial break? And I always found it crazy. And when we could do it, when we had a client that was willing to do that, then inevitably found awesome results.
So in terms of like the tactical advice to take away from this, if I'm a seller and I'm working with any sort of talent, right, be it radio, podcasting, influencer, creator, etc., the big thing that I'm sort of hearing here is like the more tight you put the parameters on the brief, the more restricted the talent are going to feel and the more they're just going to be executing it in a very inauthentic way. Whereas it sounds to me like if you were to craft that in a way where you say, look, here's effectively the message and the objective, here's some of the stay away from zones, or here's some of the territory we kind of need to stay away from, and here's the mandatories, but the rest of it is very pliable. You do with it what you will. You shape it in a way that you think is going to resonate and will feel authentic to you.
100%. If you flip the script a little bit and you go, you, Jamie, is one of the great salespeople that I know throughout your career, and I say that with the greatest respect. You don't just go, here's the template of a brief. I'll just put the brief together I'll put a response together on a template and flick it back to the client and hope for the best, right? You think about strategically how you're going to deliver that. And you're doing that because you're an expert in your field. And the client may have asked for it in a particular way, but you go, yeah, but they're going to get that back via everyone. So why wouldn't I? I'll add what they need, but I'll also give them another idea that just like shakes it a bit. Why can't that be the same on the content side? I guess is to try and highlight how it can work both ways.
I love that, man. I mean, and I want to take it one step further because I do find that the great salespeople typically are very creative and they actually really like getting their hands dirty when it comes to brainstorming, ideation, co-creating concepts. So this is kind of a question for those salespeople who maybe they've got a half-baked idea that they like or an angle for some sort of integrated campaign. What's like a good framework or approach to kind of, I guess, trying to get some buy-in from people to look at that? Like, how do you recommend someone would position it correctly in order to kind of drop some of those defenses, get the buy-in, or at least have like a jumping off point to a collaboration with a content creator?
The amount of times that I spoke to salespeople that hadn't heard the show they were trying to pitch on properly, like that morning, it was astounding. And I get we've all got busy lives, but like if I'm trying to sell one of our podcasts that I care about, I know intrinsically what that show's going to want to do and not want to do. So I think I'd start there, like frame it. If you've got an idea as a salesperson for a content team, then listen to the show that morning and go, does this fit? Like, how would they deliver this if I just gave them this idea? How do I think they would deliver it? And start there. And then maybe framing it to a program director or a executive producer, or depending on which show or station you're in, then saying, hey, here's an idea I've had. I don't know if it's any good, but do you think this is in line with where the guys would be or the gals would be? But be open to not just having your idea be the one.
Okay, I like that. What about for a different medium? So, maybe it's like a piece of long-form video content or a branded content series that a client's really invested in, and there's maybe the shell of an idea. Like how would the approach to pitching that maybe change where it really is its own thing and doesn't need to live inside another content sort of ecosystem, if you will? But conversely, you don't want it to be a 5-hour ad for the client's product that nobody wants to watch.
Again, it's, go back to that thing I said at the start. It starts with the audience. So who's the audience? Who's going to watch it? Where's it going to live? If it's going to live on your website as a client, so client A is, has 1 million views on their website a month, and that's the audience, then great. So those people coming to your website, what do you know about them? Are they coming to your website to find out more about you? Are they already engaged through something else? Like it really gets back to that point. What's the audience need from this piece of content, whatever that piece of content might be? And I think if you start there, it sort of is easy. It's not magic. It's just starting with what does the audience need? And the audience might be other clients. The audience might be consumers. But I feel like if you start there, you'll always come up with an idea that wins because you've got the audience as the first step.
What's been your experience of the other way around? And so what I mean by that is, like, at Podshape, you're designing shows and you are clearly going, this is the audience. Like, how big's the audience? Where do I find them? What am I going to deliver? Like, what is this podcast going to deliver on for them? When you're creating a new piece of content like that, do conversations ever come up around brand partners or the type of categories that might be good to sponsor this content? Like, does that happen?
One of the great things I was taught, and I'm going to name check here, one, because I think he's a sensational leader, and two, I think he's a really smart commercial man, and he happens to be the CEO of Nova, Peter Charlton, told me in my sort of days as a head of podcast was, have we ever thought about starting with the client first, i.e. think about the brand and then work backwards from that? And that was a really interesting idea. So actually now when we think about shows, that's part of the conversation. Where does this fit in the landscape? Who would buy this sort of thing? Who would want to sponsor it? And sometimes you go, okay, that answers some of your questions. So maybe you don't live with, and maybe you make the call early on. So there are shows that we do that aren't sponsored, but we still do them because they fit what we're trying to do, which is, shape the world through stories. And there are other shows that we've thought about. Okay. And that question's still asked. It's not that we don't ask the question. We just go, this probably doesn't have a category in mind.
Yeah. I sorry to cut you off, but I've always thought that that's one of the real interesting things is that, like, here's this great thing. We think it's great. Here's the audience. And you go, cool. What type of brands do you think would work well here? And you can always get an answer of what won't work. You always get we don't want to touch gambling. We don't want to touch this. We don't want to touch this. But it's very rare that you actually go, this would suit somebody in this or this category. And that, to me, for a salesperson is gold, because that's actually where you can help. Like, that allows you to then really quickly go, great, I know exactly where I can channel this opportunity in the most efficient fashion to potentially get the thing sold.
And we've had a couple of those sales leaders in our business that we do that very thing, where we'll have a conversation about, great, client doesn't want to buy a podcast. What are they after? They really want this. Okay, cool. What could we create to help them do that? And, that's happened for us multiple times, and multiple times we have an excellent relationship with client, excellent relationship with talent, and make some money along the way.
Yeah, we had a funny one actually. There was a promotional concept that got delivered to me years ago, and the opening line of the concept was, "While our listeners toil away, struggling to make ends meet." And I was like, I got to stop you. Like, who wants to buy that audience? And funnily enough, one of my reps, it was a bit of a smart aleck reply, but said, "My budget." I went, perfect. Actually, there is a client for this, and this actually speaks exactly to the pain point. So.
But what happens if that one client doesn't want it? So who are the others?
Cash converters.
Yeah.
But no, you're exactly right. You've got to be flexible too. I mean, I remember we had, and I'll name check a bit here too, but that great content piece that Christian O'Connell did, The Stuff of Legends, which was a podcast series with some really big names. And it was an impressive thing to take out to market. But it was also actually really difficult to go, who's the obvious 3 or 4 clients that really fit this? And so that actually is a challenge. And it does take time to actually sit there and workshop it. And sometimes the content team having even a half-baked idea in their mind of who that is can really bridge that gap a lot quicker.
Interesting. I've got a bit of a story. I can't give you all of the story because I'm currently in production with the thing. But we had a conversation with a client maybe 6 months ago, and they're an insurance client. I'll give you that much. And not that exciting sort of content stream, if you like, except, of course, when this insurance client mentioned, have you ever heard of this thing called blah? And I was like, no, but I'm super interested. So I went down a rabbit hole, started doing looking into it, and we've been creating an investigative podcast around this particular thing that will launch in the next 3 to 4 months. And what we'll do before we launch is we'll go back to that client and say, hey, because of what you told us, here's what we've created. What do you think? And let them be in the buy-in. So we will build a trailer before we go to production on all of the other bits. So the client can actually feel part of the piece as opposed to the client just being, some cash in the bank at the end of the day. So it really can happen both ways. We did it when we built as a podcast that we did called The Glitch. But when we were building that, I was like, okay, who wants to talk? It was a financial crime. He stole $1.6 million from a bank. So that's banks out. And he went to jail for a year. So it was a crime. So who would want to sponsor that? And we went back to the audience. We went, okay, who's the audience that's going to listen to this 20-something bloke who stole all this money and had a big party? Like, we're talking all the things you shouldn't do. He did. And we found, at the time, we found a crypto company that was super interested, and they became the sponsor. It was a simple one.
I thought you were going to say a defense attorney, criminal defense.
We've done that too. We have a bunch of true crimes where, we've got a couple of shows that have an audience that talk to men that have done bad things. And
it stands to reason that people doing nefarious activities probably don't mind listening about people doing it too.
Correct.
Yeah. That's awesome, mate, because I think what I took from that too, which I think is a really powerful thing, and it's a bit of a slower burn, but it's this whole idea of co-creation with the client. Hey, we're thinking of building this thing. Would you have any interest in having a bit of input into it? And sort of kind of come on that journey a bit with us. That's a really powerful opener to a conversation.
But you can also talk budgets in that early stage. Hey, something like this would cost around this. Here's the types of audiences we've had prior. This is our schematic, for this particular client. Could we integrate, some of your investigators into this? Could we speak to someone in the insurance company to talk about the thing that we're doing? There's just so many options once you start thinking, once you're opening up. But again, it comes back to that initial thought, which is, I'm actually just starting with the audience.
Yep. And to that, sort of to jump into the next question, because it's a good jumping off point, is what are some of those things that the content or editorial team in media are really wanting more from the sales team? Like, if I'm a seller right now, what are the easy wins that are going to help me garner favor, top up the emotional bank account, and be the favorite person, of that team when it comes time to actually ask for a favor?
I mean, it's interesting. This might be a sideline, Jamie, but it's interesting. I don't consider talent the only talent. I consider people that sell talent. Like, it's a talent. It's a very hard job. So I would think about it. One of the easiest things to do to a show that you might be trying to sell, or a content series you might be trying to do, is listen to the show. Talk to the team. Hey, I heard the show this morning. I'm working with a client at the moment, and I think they could really be interesting in that bit you were talking about this morning. Is that something you'd be interested in? Mm-hmm. How's a talent going to go, oh, how dare you? How dare you listen to my show? How dare you tell me you really liked what I heard this morning? Like, it just makes no sense. So I think that's a starting point. And it gets back to just listen to the show. Secondly, I think, I know there's an adage about the tighter the brief, the better the sell, but don't be so prescriptive that you are just trying to peddle an idea that's been given to you, or an idea that you may have come up with yourself. Like, be prescriptive with what the client wants, i.e., the client wants people to trial their burger. That's still prescriptive. It's still tight. Still a tight brief. And then you might go, and we want to talk to 2554s. Well, that's not that tight, right? So you just be prescriptive in what the client needs, and then we work through what the audience will take.
And almost like to go a step ahead of that, trying to negate some of those conversations around prescriptive briefs before they even come in the building. Because there's always going to be that tension between sales and content. But I do think that sometimes there are conversations that salespeople could and should be having in market that are going to just minimize those tricky briefs or those tricky requests making their way back into show. So what in your view, I guess, in terms of the person who's probably been fielding a lot of those types of requests, what are some of those things that people should be saying in market rather than bringing it back in and making it the content team's problem?
I think it gets back to, we really want to trial blah. It's like, okay, can I just learn? It's just asking better questions. It's asking more questions, because if you've heard the show, you know when a client says this is what we want, you go, wow, there's no way in the world our show can do that. So let's just step back a few steps and go, and why is it that you feel that's important? And like, a client's not just coming to you because they think that's what they want. Like we will often do now, we'll often speak to a client and go, okay, cool. What's the angle here? What are you trying to do? Oh, we just want, and brand awareness isn't enough. Like, oh, we just want brand awareness. Like, how wide do you want something? So it's like, yeah, but what does that mean? What does brand awareness mean to you? We want people to see us, or we want people to know what we do. Cool. What is it you do? And like, just keep digging. It's like just that asking better questions is actually not that hard. It's just asking more questions. Just going back to your 5-year-old self and ask why every 2 seconds. Why? But why? But why? And you will find there will be a piece of gold in there.
It's so funny you say that, because I think, having been here too, it can be very easy to see a shortcut to money when you go, okay, the client tells us exactly what they want. All we got to do is go and have that uncomfortable conversation internally and just jam it through. And then we've kind of got that direct pathway to the money. And I think intuitively, people might think that by probing more, they're jeopardizing the revenue or they're pushing back on the client. Where, to your great point, I think it's the opposite, mate. I think it actually makes for a much more robust conversation. It makes the quality of your thinking much stronger. And I think sometimes it's like, if it was just up to the client to tell you what they want, then it's not really a consultative role that you're in. It's like, you may as well just be the rate card. You may as well just be the online platform. So being able to challenge a little bit and kind of have those conversations, I think is actually going to lead to better work and probably let you write more revenue in the long run too.
And there's one other piece that happens in that transaction we just talked about. So if you just bring something back and get it over the line to make a budget, what damage have you done to the trust with the talent? And then what damage have you also done to the client? Because now you've set up a scene where every time they say this, and you go, yep, sure, because I want the money, and you deliver something that's half-baked, and at some point, the talent will stop delivering in a way that is authentic, and everything falls apart.
Yeah. There's a tax that you pay, and interestingly,
everything costs money, or everything costs something.
Well, there was one very real example I remember of that, where we had a massive advertiser in the market. It was one of those scenarios of like, if you want to be on the buy, you're going to do this and you're going to do it our way. And I just think at the time, the whole business made a decision we were going to play ball. And there was a massive, massive issue in the implementation of that idea, because they're not content people. They're a client, in a very boring category, by the way. But, it was this big blow up. And I remember I was sort of then having to front up to the client. And it was kind of like, look, if you want us to do this stuff under duress and you want to be this prescriptive and control things, you also have to be accountable for the potential consequences of what happened when it doesn't go right. Like, there's reasons that these people actually, want to co-create these ideas or create these ideas, because we actually know what's going to work versus what some of the risks are of not executing properly. And so that's, maybe that's just more of a lesson for certain clients, is like, we're in a soft market. Clients are getting conditioned to ask for a lot more and to push for a lot more value. And I think integration with content and getting more of that stuff inherently is where a lot of brands will go. They'll become quite master servant. And I think we just got to take a moment to realize that that's not a good thing in the long run for your brand, for that audience, or certainly for that relationship moving forward as well.
Yeah, and it does get down to relationship. The three-way relationship between talent, the person in the middle, which is generally a content person, the leader of some description. It might be an EP of a show, could be, a myriad of those people. And then you've got sales and then a client. And so if that relationship is strong, then, you've got a star team that's kicking goals, both with audience and revenue.
Nice. All right. Listener question before we take this thing home.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
And this one is very close to both of our hearts.
Hey, Jamie. I work in agency sales for a radio network, and I'm sure you know clients continue to push for strong ideas, deep content integration, and more involvement with talent. The issue is our content director is a big roadblock for anything making its way in show. There's no openness to client-led ideas. Every request gets rejected without an alternative, and any idea that comes from show are just asking for $1,000 prize money for a pre-built tactic, with a basic client credit line tagged on the end. We're at a competitive disadvantage here, but I'm struggling to see a way forward, as the natural escalation point is my sales director speaking with the national content director. This hasn't really worked in the past. Any tips on how to reset here and get this person on side?
Now, I will caveat, this listener is overseas.
Okay,
it's not
good.
anyone in the industry that you and I have worked with,
Great.
but it does feel like a bit of a universal issue. So
Yeah, listen, 100%. And listen, I used to say, and I'll probably get in trouble for this. Actually, I won't get in trouble for it because it's fine.
From
myself, yeah. Maybe my business partner and wife. But anyway, I used to say, if you want a short answer, if you want a quick answer, the answer's no. And that I think is fair, because if you want a quick answer in the corridor, hey, we've got this client, they want to do this thing. No. If you want to give me some time to actually think through it with the team and come up with our best response, then the answer is possibly yes. And so I think that's the starting point. But equally, there are bad salespeople and there are bad content directors. Like, it is a thing. So sometimes you won't win, and sometimes you go, okay, cool. He's or they are only accepting $1,000 tactics where we give away $1,000. Let me come up with 20 great $1,000 tactics. So if I already know that content director wants a $1,000 tactic, then let me find a great $1,000 tactic, or 20 of them that I can pitch to 20 clients. 5 of them come off. Content director gets what he needs. Clients get on the air.
Yeah.
It still is a win-win situation.
That's a great advice. You know, it's funny, I certainly haven't come up against quite this level of resistance in my time, but I have come across content directors who are more protective, or radio stations in particular that just generally don't have that content airtime to actually use, right? Like, its shows are completely full already. There genuinely is no ability to do something in breakfast, for example. And whilst this isn't a solution to the interpersonal dynamic, it is actually a workaround for the salesperson. Is get really good at your packaging, like get really clever. You don't have to call it a 30-second spot. You don't have to call it a sponsorship. You don't have to call it a live read. Like, there are ways to take a unit of time on the radio station and turn it into whatever you want it to kind of be, and to make it feel like it's still part of the fabric of the station, or it's still integrated, or in some way, is kind of like station-led. It just means that you're delivering it through a slightly different type of inventory than in show with talent.
And listen, I know that, radio networks now, and, I was part of it as they started to get designed, some years ago, create teams inside radio networks, right? I'm using that as an ideation team, essentially, and they run the gamut between content and sales, right? And for me, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe smaller networks and stations don't have that, but I think it's a good area to play. And if you're in a smaller station, maybe you're part of a small network in regional Australia, as an example, you might build a little ideation team that has respective members of the content team, the sales team, and maybe a mediator. And you use that as your little creation team. Hey, okay, what are our challenges right now? Well, we really need to, here's the hit list of clients we're going after. Could we come up with some ideas?
I love that. And it's not just in radio. I mean, even when I was at oMedia and Out of Home, we had Polly, which was kind of like the internal creative arm, and were the ones who would be there for any of those briefs that kind of didn't naturally sit just as a pure commercial solution. They are absolutely a luxury, but you're exactly right. Ultimately, they're just assembled of people who are creative, who understand, who have commercial acumen, but understand kind of the role of content, and know that their job is to kind of meet in the middle there and serve the advertiser and the audience, and protect the brand, right? It's kind of that three-way thing that they have to balance.
And if you look through Australian media right now, there are some killer people in those roles, right? Like really strong, commercially minded creatives who do deliver. You see them, you hear them, and you're like, wow, that's a smart idea. I wish I had to come up with that one.
Yeah, they're the real unicorn people too, because it's very hard to write a job spec for them. You just go, I need someone like a Michael Dargan, or I need someone like a Bag, like an Andrew Sidwell.
Yeah.
Like those people, they kind of are themselves what the role is. Now, that's the end of the actual content of this show, but I wanted to get you to just give us a quick rundown of what else we should be checking out from the world of Podshape before we end, mate. What's going on there?
Listen, we play a lot in true crime, so we obviously have a lot of investigative series. We've got a couple of really interesting shows, I think, outside of true crime that we really love working with, and talented creators. Ashley Bynes and Tiana do a show called She Rises, which is very much female under 30. We've got a sports show called The Shed with Sam Thaidak, Gory Oates and Kit Whiteman. It's a twice weekly show that's video content and audio content. And we're currently in the studio next to me right now recording a new show, which will sort of work at 50-something women with a couple of creators who have sizable audiences. And we're super excited to get it launched. So that'll launch in the next month or so.
Beautiful. Well, I'll be sure to keep people posted. And mate, it was awesome to talk to you, bud. Really appreciate your insights today, and great to kind of see what you're doing at Podshape, sort of out of the audio world now and across this whole multimedia kind of space too. So I'll make sure I link the Podshape website in the show notes, and definitely go check that stuff out if you haven't already. It's more likely that people have heard your content than mine, but if anyone hasn't, I'll send them your way, Jay.
And I'll do the same, Jamie. I'll do the same.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Good to talk as always. Cheers, bud.
Cheers, bro. See you, bro.